So today, I've set my sights on the Devil May Cry reboot. Specifically, no walking means that I was not allowed to touch the left stick on my controller at all. And to clarify, the left stick is responsible for walking and running, changing the direction in which the character is facing, performing directional input moves like Stinger, and activating Devil Trigger. So for this run, I denied myself all of these functions and set out to see if it was possible to beat the game. Oh, and of course it had to be done on the hardest difficulty in the game. I have to mention that I'm not the most knowledgeable about the reboot. I tested a handful of things, found some promising results, and then began streaming the run with the hopes that my chat could supplement my knowledge gaps. The first mission began very modestly, with me flailing around in an alley. I struggled to get past the first turn in the run. Definitely not an omen for things to come, right? I eventually found out what would be the first of many important techniques. Helm Splitter was able to shift Dante's position to the left. He would still be facing straight on, but with this technique, I was able to kind of shimmy along to the left and get through the very first obstacle. After stumbling into a soft lock... wait. I started puzzle solving the next areas. The important things to mention here are that restarting from checkpoint and falling off the stage were ways to potentially change Dante's angle. Restarting checkpoint would often place Dante facing the direction that I needed to go, and in cases where the checkpoint was pretty far back or I had to make multiple different turns, if there was a way to fall off of the stage, typically it would reset me also facing the way that I needed to go. Eventually, I made my way into a building where there was no way to fall off of the stage, and the checkpoint was at the beginning of a very long hallway. What I discovered here was that Angel Dash, my main form of forward movement, when performed when colliding with a wall, would allow me to bounce myself off in the opposite direction. But there was a neat little quirk to this in that if the surface I was bouncing off of was angled in a certain way, I wouldn't turn 180 degrees around. Instead, I would get some pretty weird angles that ended up helping me a ton in closed quarters. In this hallway, I also learned about roaming spiders. Typically, you find these little guys hanging around areas with secrets or just chilling in some hallways. And if I used a gun to shoot them, Dante would turn to face wherever he's shooting. I was able to use this to change the direction I was facing, and with these two techniques combined, I managed to zigzag my way through this hallway and pushed forward. Now, you might think that the bosses would be really hard in this run, what with the whole not really being able to move thing and all. But at least for the first few bosses, that wasn't the case. They were kind of pushovers. Mission 2 ended up being my nightmare. It was a long level in its own right, and the entire Sparta mansion was comprised of tight spaces and tricky platforming. The hallways boiled down to me zigzagging my way through and trying to change my angle on the jutting rocks to get through certain doorways. And when it came to the open platforming sections, I started utilizing another interesting quirk of the game. By doing a neutral air dodge, Dante's angle would change, but only on the first dodge. Essentially, you can think of the air dodge as being locked to cardinal directions, so performing it would set me to the nearest one. But even with all of this, I ran into my first wall, or lack thereof in this case. First, I had to make a pretty sharp right turn, and there was virtually no ground for me to work with. I had a couple platforms to jump on, but that was about it. I struggled for hours to figure out how I would go about getting through this. Through some miracle, I managed to get onto the second platform without demon pulling the first one towards me. And ultimately, I managed to demon pull the first platform while standing on the second one, which changed my angle enough for me to be able to get onto solid ground. But remember, this was just one small victory in a sea of platforming puzzles and walls. Seriously, so much of this mission felt like a miracle. There were so many different things that all had to come together for me to get through all of these sections, and somehow, some way, they did. Except for this. This was another soft lock. For Mission 3, there's actually a pretty famous skip for the first encounters. There's a trigger for a cutscene that's active from the beginning of the mission, so by grappling an enemy and jumping off of him, I managed to grab the blue rose and get started on the next platforming puzzle. Once again, the only reason that this section managed to work out was because I was able to use a tiny piece of uneven concrete to get an almost perfect angle for flying directly to the next platform. And the end of the mission also had several platforms that were just in reach with some neutral angel boosting. That all changed in Mission 4 though. This mission introduced timed platforming sections, which turned out to be the bane of my existence. Yeah, I was making it through all these missions, but I never said I was doing them fast. The most important thing I needed for this run was time, and that's exactly the thing that these sections began stripping away. I couldn't spend 3 minutes shimmying to the left or right. I had to figure things out on the spot in a matter of seconds. I'm letting the whole successful clip play out here because honestly, I don't have too many words to describe this section. Once again, it felt like a complete miracle that it was even possible. But what wasn't possible was the section at the end of the level. Another timed area where platforms would fall out from under you if you weren't fast enough. The trouble was, the gaps kept getting wider and the platforms were not directly across from each other. They were slightly to the left or the right, and while I managed to make it all the way to the second to last platform, there was simply no way for me to get far enough to the right and forward to reach the final platform. This was where the run died, right here in this church. And to make matters worse, I was immediately met with a forced walking section at the start of Mission 5. There were no options here. Weapons could not be swung, dodging could not be performed, and the only option was to walk. When literally everything else was taken away, fine, I concede. This section and one other in Mission 12 meant that no walking was totally impossible. But I wouldn't really count these two instances against the run because they legitimately removed any other option. Regardless, we press on. The first big open room I came across provided challenging platforming, but it was nothing I hadn't dealt with before. And in the second room, I skipped all the platforming by using an enemy to basically fly my way to the end. Mission 6 started out with another timed hallway and some light platforming. It had a generous timer though, so nothing to worry about, and once again, the boss was kind of a pushover. What wasn't a pushover was Mission 7. Right at the beginning, I was staring down the barrel of a 90-degree curved turn with small platforms. None of the techniques I had been using up until this point could have helped me overcome this obstacle. But when we needed him most, a hero appeared. At least that's what I would say, but I can't actually find his comment anymore. But trust me when I say that it outlined exactly how to do what I'm about to demonstrate. Armed with knowledge from the Library of Alexandria, this saint threw me a bone. They told me of the hidden secret flight jutsu. By repeatedly charging Eric's aerial slam attack and canceling the charge with fireworks from the shotgun, you could gain infinite height. Now, as I came to find out, the devs did put an invisible ceiling on every level. However, this height was more than enough for me to angel glide my way over to where I needed to be, effectively skipping the entire curved platforming turn. As luck would have it, this technique became extremely pivotal to the run. I started using it everywhere. For example, this building seemed tricky to get around, but thanks to the advent of flight, I managed to make it happen with some clever platforming. And in Mission 8, I had to enter the subway, and it was just like real life. I ended up spending way more time in that place than I ever wanted to, plus it smelled bad, and the people were rude. Yeah, try and get me now, you son. I tried cheesing Mission 9 by flying myself up to where the mission would normally end, but 1, I couldn't quite reach the last platform, and 2, I doubt that the trigger was even active. So I took the long way. Mission 10 had more of the infamous timed platforming with a beam chasing me. It wasn't easy to figure out, but I got through it. And before I could fight the boss, I had a few more platforms to overcome. Nothing timed, but the platforms were pretty far apart and kind of staggered to the left and right. I still couldn't turn my character or change my angle without a wall, and the ceiling in this room was also relatively low, so a max height angel boost didn't get me anywhere either. This is where I started to make a small alteration to the ancient flight formula. Angel boost could only be performed in the air one time before landing, but Caliber, a short dash performed with Aquila, could be used an infinite number of times in the air. By weaving calibers in between my Eric's shotgun cancels, I could not only gain unlimited height, but also consistent forward movement. So, remember when I said the ending of Mission 4 was impossible? Well, with this technique, that all changed. I went back after acquiring this forbidden knowledge and completed the ending of Mission 4 legitimately. But back to Barbas with the news, this technique was slow. I had to do a lot of inputs in rapid and consistent succession, and this was a long room. Even a single misinput would cause me to do the wrong thing and fall to my death, placing me all the way back to the very first platform in the room. It took me 5 minutes of flying to get from one end of the room to the other, and my hands were not happy with me. But we still had a boss to take down. Barbas was unique in the fact that he's kind of a gimmick fight. He throws a variety of attacks out, and you're meant to dodge them on your way to pressing one of the 3 buttons around the arena. Once a button is pressed, the boss lets his shield down, and you can wail on him. He has 3 phases, with each one requiring an additional button press. What I quickly came to find out was that the buttons were on a timer. So by the time I got to the 3rd phase and needed to press all 3 buttons around the arena, well, I just didn't have the speed to make it happen. But what I did have was ingenuity. Who needs to interface with mechanics when you can just brute force your way through? I started slamming my head against the boss. Literally. Now, normally, Barbas's big head has a shield that negates damage, knocks you back, and damages you if you try hitting it. For guns, bullets just bounce off. However, if you get right up in his business and shoot the shotgun, it clips into his model enough to touch his hitbox. It wasn't much damage, but it didn't need to be. This strategy was also extremely safe because I could guilt-free enemy step off of his forehead to rival KSI and stay above just about every single attack he would throw out. There also turned out to be a pretty neat side effect to this approach. Between phases, Bob would take Dante into a news section themed ad phase, equipped with a filter, news headlines, all the bells and whistles. But because I triggered the phase transition without doing the proper mechanics, when I entered the second ad phase, the filters and headlines were nowhere to be found. After taking care of a few more missions, I was faced with another big flying section in the nightclub. And then I found out that babies are really easy to beat up. The real challenge came back with mission 16. Casually, this mission is a 2-minute long escort. You clear a few obstacles and continue on your way. For me, however, it was my downfall. And Virgil's, cause he kept crashing. All sections in this mission were on a timer. If the timer ran out, a cutscene played and then it was game over. The very first thing I had to do in this mission was grapple onto the Virgil mobile and then get onto a shipping container to pull another one out of the way. The issue? Using an angel grapple sets Dante's angle to a specific direction, and that direction was decidedly not where I needed to go. I spent 15 minutes replaying this 15-second section over and over and over. I tried everything in my tool belt to make anything happen. I had already started feeling like this part was impossible, but I had to exhaust every possible angle, pun intended. On one odd attempt, I rolled backwards after landing on the car and noticed something. I slipped off, but when I slipped, Dante's angle changed. Maybe, just maybe, I could slide off the back window and cancel that slide with a jump to get the perfect angle. It was a long shot, but it was the only thing I had. And after a few attempts, I actually managed it. Ironically, that was the only difficult part of the mission, and the rest went off without a hitch. But I was out of the frying pan and into the freezer. The very next section was another timed segment with platforms falling beneath my feet. Only this time, it wasn't a straight shot. There were twists and turns on this winding timed path, and I simply didn't think I had what it took to get through it legitimately. But off in the distance, there was a building standing amidst the chaos. I thought, if I could get on that building, perhaps I could find a way to fly myself all the way to the end and skip the entire thing. After much trial and error, I managed to do exactly that. I was inches away from the final platform. Once I landed on it, a fight would trigger, and then all I'd have to do was run inside Mundus Tower. If only it were that easy. Reality hit me like a ton of bricks as I fell through the floor that lured me in with its sweet words of safety and comfort. It was all a lie. The platform was never active, the ground fake. This meant that I had to hit specific triggers throughout the initial escape sequence that would cause the floor to become real by the time I got to it. By this point, my only recourse was to do it legitimately. I managed to find a consistent setup that helped propel me to the first grapple point, and from there I was able to jump around, wall bounce, and do just a little bit of flying, enough to get where I needed to go. And with the timed event overcome, the rest of the stage was pretty bog standard, maneuvering through hallways, using the environment to my advantage, and making my way to the roof. I thought I was home free after the final difficult encounter of the mission, but then they threw another timed section at me. This one was arguably the worst of them all. I wasn't dealing with falling platforms. Rather, the platforms were moving on a cycle that I had to hit. And if I missed that cycle, it black screened me and reset me to the start. I had no time to waste. It was trial and error just trying to line up the first few jumps and then figure out how to get enough distance to latch on to the moving grapple point. The final product looks extremely clean and simple, but trust me, it took so much effort to figure out the proper sequence of buttons and timing to get it to work. Mission 17 operated on cycles where flames would engulf the space around floating platforms, so I wasn't able to fly around too much in this one. I pretty much had to follow the paths given to me and do some pretty specific setups to change my angles since I didn't have many walls to help me out. Mission 18 was the final mission that had any sort of real movement in it, and it opened up with a single big room and 4 branching paths. The objective was to visit each path, activate a switch, and then return to the center to solve a puzzle. Getting into each hallway wasn't too taxing, but early on I found one hallway where my initial angle simply wasn't gonna work, and the angle I got from falling also didn't help. Another miracle occurred, where by the time that I finished doing the other hallways, when returning to the central room, I beelined to that last hallway with an angle that allowed me to glide down to the generator perfectly. The puzzle itself was just a lot of shimmying, and before I knew it, all I had left were a couple of bosses. Mundus became a hulking monstrosity who attempted to crush Dante with his giant fists, but I found a consistent way to dodge all of his slams, jumping and angel dashing at the correct time. Once his hand was down, I could shoot to orient myself towards it, then damage it however I could. He also performed a double-fisted slam, which was easily evaded with a neutral air dodge, and he could slam his right hand at the edge of the arena to create a shockwave that I could just jump over. He had one final attack where he would do 3 consecutive slams in a row, and this one was so finicky to dodge, it usually just ended my run. He only performed this attack, however, with his right arm, so I definitely wanted to knock that one out first. And once I managed to cripple it, the rest of the fight was cake. Virgil was all that was left. Since this run was done on the PC version and not Definitive Edition, I managed to manipulate Virgil's AI into performing a single attack on loop. How did I do it? I shot the shotgun. Yep, that's it. If you hit him with the shotgun after his attacks, he'll continue to do the exact same attack every single time. And in one last valiant attempt to stop me, Virgil summoned his doppelganger to protect him. And to close out the run, I used the left stick. The only way to defeat Virgil in his desperate state was to activate Devil Trigger. In other words, clicking in on both the right stick and the left stick. There was no way around it, and so to send the run off, I broke the rules of the challenge and completed the game. So, is it possible to beat DmC Devil May Cry without walking? Not really. Several forced walking sections and the forced devil trigger activation at the end make it impossible. But 99% of the game can absolutely be completed without ever touching the left stick, and that's something I can be proud to say that I did. Here's a quick shout out to my amazing channel members, and thank you all so much for watching. Remember that you matter. I hope you had a chance to laugh or smile today and do something nice for yourself. Have a wonderful day, everyone.